Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette, and thank you for joining us to stay curious today with a popular guest and a good friend of our museum, Mr. Bob Granath.
All
Bob,
right. Great
greetings.
to be here.
Happy to you. You're looking great today. We got a beautiful Florida autumn day going
Oh,
on
we
after
do.
all that rain we had.
Oh, yeah,
You live in Titusville. Let
I
people
do.
know we got a lot of rain.
We did. Something like 12 and a half inches in 6 hours.
Yeah, it
It
was
was
worse than
fierce, yeah.
hurricanes even.
Oh, yeah.
Really kind of interesting there. So want to say hi to everybody. No more so than our friend Marty Winkle. There's Flat Marty. He's taking care of family business in New York State, on Long Island actually. So Marty, great to see you there. We're checking out our friends on the American Space Museum channel here. As I'm pulling it up, we are live. Matthew Raj is on there today, waiting for y'all to chime in and say hello to us. So you're going to hear a great program today from Bob. What you going to talk about?
We're going to talk about things you may not know about the space program. Just a bunch of random things that I kind of went through and put together, and some things that some pretty cool that is not something you'd really think about right off the cuff, and you're thinking about the American space program.
Well, we got some clever, smart people out there. Well,
Oh,
so they might know everything, but I
well,
think
they
there'll be
may.
a few things that you don't know about that we're going to
Yeah.
talk about. So great to have you here, Bob. We're going to also talk about a little mission that you covered
Oh, yes.
27 years
That's
ago.
right.
Here's the pin from it. Well, I might have Raj zoom in on that in a minute here, not right now as we get rolling. This is STS-95 launch guest pin, okay?
Yep.
And
We wore these if you were out at the VIP site, the Banana Creek viewing site. You wore one of these to let the security people know you're supposed to be there. So
so
all the people we had on our VIP bus, we passed out one of these buttons for them all to wear.
and just when you think you've seen the last of something at a museum, when people bring them into me, and one of these pops up in somebody's things that they've given us, or
Yeah.
and I'm going like, wow, that's cool. When am I going to see another one of those? And Hugh Harris had a bag of about 100 of them
Oh, wow.
that we got in the late Hugh Harris's stuff there, and but that happens quite frequently. You think, oh my gosh, there's not going to be any more of this Apollo 15 decal left. I'm gonna, sell that for $5, and then you open up something and there's a stack of them.
Right.
It's still dwindling down, and I noticed Mercury and Gemini stuff is really, really hard to find out
Oh, yeah.
there.
Yes.
So hello, Dean Babcock and Steve Jokums and Rosalie Jubilee. All right, thank you so much, and we're going to get into our program here and take your questions a little bit later. We got Marty Winkle, like I said. Flat Marty's out there listening to us, and on the back scene there, and Matthew Raj is there. If he sees something pop up that we want to a question that pertains to what we're talking about. Sometimes they ask something that gets us way off track, Raj, and we'll go back and get that at the end of the show, okay? So we do have a memorabilia show that's really holiday oriented. Bob, I talked to a lady named Emily, and she's got going to have a couple tables of just ornaments.
Ah,
So if you're local, looking for put that smile on that space lovers holiday list there, come to our November 8th Saturday memorabilia show at the Hyatt Place in Titusville. Free admission. You can even get a free appraisal of items from Ken Havicott and his business there. Space Coast Covers is what it's called. So also our sponsor today is going to be the Hyatt Place, and the Hyatt Place is very affordable here on the Space Coast. It's on the way that you go into Kennedy Space Center on the
that's right.
405. Beautiful Sally Ride Bridge is been built, not dedicated, but that's what it's called, the Sally Ride Memorial Bridge, and these people will take care of you. We've had 4 shuttle fests there and a couple other events, but this will be our home for our memorabilia shows as we're moving it off Cocoa Beach And this will be plenty of parking and a lot of good fellowship going on. I
Oh,
hope to
yes.
see you there, Bob.
All right.
You got anything to sell? Any
Um,
wares yet?
I haven't
I know
pulled
you got a
anything
treasure
yet.
trove of it. Yeah.
Have a garage full of stuff. I need to go through it.
Well, please do, and we'll get it out there. Well, today we like sharing an artifact out of our
Okay.
museum, and this is an artifact that we have John Glenn's hard hat and pictures of him
Oh.
wearing it. And don't tell anybody that I put it on, Bob, out of our case there.
Okay.
Okay, but I had to get some of my DNA on that. As indeed, we're going to talk to Bob a few minutes here about before his program that he's put together about the STS-95 launch of John Glenn and 6 other people, other astronauts. And here are the Mark and Tom Usiak photos of the walkout and so forth on that. You got a lot of interesting backstories about this because, and everybody does,
Oh, yeah.
because everybody wanted to talk about John Glenn. All right. And I'm going to give you what the mission patch is all about. But
Yeah.
as a public affairs officer, everybody wanted to talk to John Glenn, but Commander Kurt Brown there on the far right got a little perturbed about 6 months of this pestering for John Glenn.
John Glenn, right?
Tell us about that, Bob.
Well, one of the things that came out of that is people were saying, you got to remember there are 6 other people on this crew. And it was a fascinating group of individuals. We even had a Japanese astronaut, had one from France and all this. And so
It was.
one of the things that happened is in all this discussion, you've got it. Yes, it's John Glenn, but there are all these other things that are going on this flight and other people. And so the person who did the countdown commentary was the director of public affairs for NASA at Kennedy Space Center, Lisa Malone, who worked out there. She started a couple of years before I did, got to know her really well. But as she was doing the liftoff commentary, just as the rocket began to rise off the launch pad, she said, "Liftoff of 6 American heroes and 1 American legend." And I thought, what a good way to put it, to give the credit to John Glenn that he needed, but also to recognize you have 6 heroes on board.
Well, I've gotten to know Lisa Malone, who succeeded Hugh Harris. In many ways, she even takes care of the NASA luncheon that they get together once a month that you and I enjoy.
Right.
Because I'm the coattails hanger on. You guys are the official there. So I know Lisa very well as we're looking at President Clinton
Right.
and his wife, who
Hillary
became
there.
Secretary of State, Hillary
That's right.
Clinton.
They're on the roof of the Launch Control Center.
Do you have
which
anything to
is-
do with that?
Well, no, I don't have anything to do with that. But they had the astronauts' spouses and immediately families on the roof of the Launch Control Center. So they're by themselves, and they were joined with that with President and Mrs. Clinton for the liftoff.
But this phrase that Lisa said got her a lot of notoriety.
It did.
Tell
And-
the phrase again and tell her where
Yeah,
put
yeah,
her up
when
there.
she said liftoff of 6 American heroes and 1 American legend, that became such a popular thing to say. She was invited to be on Ellen's talk show not long after that, and so it got her some notoriety. But it's because she's just a very skilled public affairs professional, and she worked out there a number of years and did a great job, and was a very good leader in the NASA Public Affairs organization, working carefully with people like myself in the contractor public affairs realm. And in fact, after the space shuttle program, when I went to work at the press site, she was one of my bosses out there.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, great person, very humble. I've never heard that about her in there. As we got our friends watching today, Tom Usiak, who took this beautiful picture. Nice to see Bob on Stay Curious again. And Mitch Rothman and his Man Space, also a sponsor of our program, says it's a beautiful day in Colorado. He's over
Good.
in their West Colorado, or over by I guess the big gap that's over there, the big
Oh, yeah.
valley. Gary Gerald's in Georgia. And Tom Celentano says, I don't have a STS-95 pin, but I wore a Friendship 7 pin today in honor of John Glenn. Just like I stuck on his hat here today on there. Very good. We'll make sure you get one of these pins your next visit, Tom Celentano. I'll save one for you. And Mostly Park likes my hat there. And High Flat Marty from Rosalie. Okay. She's talking about Marty's out of town. So, like the Flat Stanley craze of elementary school kids, there we have Marty there. So, yeah, what a guy, John Glenn. I'm from Ohio. I went to Ohio State. I was a journalist, put myself through college as a young 20-something, covering about 10 press conferences of his.
Oh yeah.
And I've shared pictures with that before. But what a congenial man. I mean, like the room rustled when he walked into any room. Who's this
Yeah.
walking in, you know?
Yeah.
Is like, and he was just very personable with everybody. That was his success. He really would pick up on something about you and make you feel like he knew you, right?
Well, that
Were you
was
ever around
exactly
him?
right. Oh, yes, several times. In fact, one of the times was right after it was announced that he would be flying on the space shuttle. There was a Spaceflight Awareness honoree luncheon, and he was there. And there were several astronauts who were shaking hands with people, posing for pictures, signing autographs. And so he set himself on one end, and there was this long line of people signing up or lining up for autographs. And some of the younger astronauts, maybe in their mid and late 20s, were going, "Oh, I've signed 25 already." He was at the other end. He must have signed hundreds that night. And he just stood there at attention like a good Marine and smiled and talked to people, posed for pictures, signed autographs for hours. And there he is, 77 years old, and it didn't faze him a bit. He just seemed to enjoy it, and people enjoyed having a chance to get to know someone who made so much history in our program. For me, one of the things that happened about that launch with John Glenn aboard is we usually, with the United Space Alliance, had 2 buses of VIPs with 40 or 50 on each bus. Well, for this one, of course, we had 3 buses. Well, one of my colleagues who was in charge of one of the other buses came up and said, "There's a Dr. Miller who's asking, can we get him inside the vehicle assembly building tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, if you do that, you might as well set him up for a VIP tour, because that's what it would take to get him into the VAB." So I said, "Well, how many is in part?" And she flips through it. And when she said Dr. Miller, I'm thinking Miller. And then I see it's Dr. George P. Mueller, who was NASA's Associate Administrator for Spaceflight during Gemini and most of the Apollo program. And I said, yes, let's do a tour for him.
Very important figure. Called on the carpet when Ranger 6 crashed in the moon. And they're wondering how, Congress want to know, why are we wasting millions of dollars then on that? On probe.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 were failures in one way or another, but 7, 8, and 9 were perfect.
Yep.
And gave us our first close-up pictures of the surface of the moon.
Maybe that'd be a good show to do, Bob. Ranger, Surveyor, and Lunar Orbiter, because we're going to use our Cape Canaveral gallery where those missions were launched to tell that story here soon, with the help of Helene Milbert's contribution, donation to our Cape Canaveral gallery. So, thank you all for wanting to watch today. This is not the main topic, STS-95, but I kind of made it so because I knew you would be there. But is those my glasses?
I think so.
Yeah, good. Okay, my cheaters. STS-95 patch was designed by the crew to reflect scientific, engineering, and historic elements of the mission. The Space Shuttle Discovery is shown rising over the sunlit Earth limb, representing the global benefits of the mission's science and solar science objectives of the Spartan satellite. The bold number 7 signifies the 7 members of Discovery's crew and also represents a historical link to the original 7 Mercury astronauts. STS-95 crew member John Glenn's first orbital flight is represented by the Friendship 7 capsule. Okay. and that's the little red capsule. They didn't make that too big there. Right there's the capsule. I had to look for it there. Yeah, could have made that a little bigger. STS-95 crew member, there it is. He may have said make it small. The rocket plumes symbolize the three major fields of science represented by mission payloads: microgravity material science, medical research for humans on Earth, and in space astronomy. So launched on this date at 2:19 p.m. It landed November 7th. Okay, nice long mission there. And Kirk Brown, where are all the people there? Let's put them up there.
Yeah.
This was a real stellar crew. The back row to the left, that's Scott Parazynski. Then Kurt Brown, the commander's got the white helmet on the right. His pilot, Steve Lindsay, on the left. Kurt flew 6 times, 4 of them as commander, or 3 and 3, I think he is. Lindsay flew many times. Scott Parazynski on the upper left. He also went to Mount Everest. Steve Robinson is beside him. Pedro Duque, European Space Agency astronaut from Spain. Chake Mukai, payload specialist. She is a god in Japan. Okay,
Oh,
for
yeah,
being
she's
the
very
first
highly
woman
respected.
up there, and Senator John Glenn at the time. And he was chosen because he'd had a physical since he was 38 years old from NASA. Here he was 77, and so I like this picture. There's the Clintons watching that. That's pretty cool. There he is. Of all the pictures you see of John Glenn, you don't see this one very often. And there he is being medically hooked up for a test there. And you know that he probably dug this as much as anything he ever did.
Oh, he did. He really wanted to make sure everyone knew he was flying for a reason, to be studied. How someone who flew in space years before and then flying again, and how that affects the human body. And so he's the oldest person ever to fly in space.
Orbit the
Or
Earth. Orbit
in
the
the
Earth.
orbit, yeah.
Yeah, you want the suborbital cosmonauts, like Shatner was 92, and Wally or Funk, and so forth. So don't want to leave them out on there. The camera that took that launch remote is on display in the museum now, is what these pictures Tom Usiak is pointing out to us. And we're not done with it yet, Tommy, but we're refreshing it every day almost, and going to get it looking really great on there. There was a little story about what's going on here. I know you know. Don't you? Involving this.
Seems like
here's another artifact from our museum.
Is that the one that fell off at liftoff?
No, we don't know which one this fell off.
Oh, okay.
But this is, tell them what this is.
Well, it's the cover over the container that had the parachute that would come off at liftoff, or as it landed, and the parachute come on to slow down the orbiter as it rolled down the runway.
Yeah. I probably should have gloves on, but it looks like this in the back with a mortar. A mortar was here.
Right.
That blasted.
And that's how it was blasted off.
Yep.
That container at the.
You see some of these little things that Terry White was talking about on the attachments there. We have this on display here, but at launch that fell off.
Yep.
Boy, there was some big concern about, it was in the least affected area of reentry of all. There, so they weren't too worried about that. So, all right, showing off artifacts, and there's the walk around with Kurt Brown and astronauts looking at the reentry there. John Glenn, after doing 3 orbits of 90 minutes each, spending 8-9 days in space up there. So about 9 days, I think it was. So awesome in there. And we've got stories over the years. We were talking about Travis Thompson, the White Room guy that was also involved with landings. Glenn was quite sick. It took about an hour for him to come around. He was vomiting the water that they intake for reentry and stuff. It took him a while, not because of his age. Travis said other astronauts too would take a longer time for them to come around before they could walk out and check out everything. So thanks for sharing these memories with us, Bob. Appreciate that. You were there, I wasn't. What a good memory to look back on too.
Oh, it is. It was really exciting.
And I understand from Carlton Bailey, hi CB, I know you're watching. He said the press corps for 95 went from about 3,000 press credentialed people to about 300 for the next launch, STS-88. That was Bob Cabana and Sturtko taking the first assembly blocks up to the space station.
Yeah, that was the first assembly mission of the International Space Station, so that was historic and important as well.
Yeah, indeed. So, well, everybody, hope you enjoyed that look back at history, but we're going to look at some more stuff. Things you didn't know about the space age. I'm turning it over to our friend Bob Granath. Take it away, buddy.
All righty. Well, when you talk about the benefits of the space program, one of the things people think about most now is these. A phone that you carry in your pocket or you have in a holster on your belt. And it's amazing what this thing can do. It's a telephone. I can take it wherever I am. I can be out in my car and I can receive phone calls and talk through the radio system in the car. I can talk to a friend out in Los Angeles and he can hear me as well as talking to somebody right next door. Also, I can go into this and check electronic mail, email. I can go into that and check the internet. You got the knowledge of the universe there at the tip of your fingers.
Bank.
And it's a great camera as well. You can take high resolution photographs and then send that photograph to a friend. And for example, my wife was out shopping one day and she saw a sport coat that looked like something that I would like. She takes a picture of it, texts me and says, "What do you think?" And I text back, "I like it." So she bought it. And it didn't take me actually going there. And the size was right. And so when I saw it look good, she thought it would look good, so get it. And so it was so easy just to text me a picture of all that with technology NASA has that you can hold in your hand. But one of the most amazing things for me was in late May of 2020, my wife and I were going on a trip to Pensacola, Florida. And it was the day of the Demo 2 launch, the first manned launch from Kennedy Space Center since the end of the Space Shuttle program. Well, I wasn't able to be here because of this trip we were going on. I drove as far as Tallahassee. We ate lunch, continued on our road. My wife decided to drive, so I pulled up my phone and called up NASA television. And when they launched that Demo 2 launched, I was able to see it live on the television, on the phone that I held in my hand while we were traveling 70 miles an hour down I-10. Mm-hmm. And so the technology in that is fantastic. Comes from NASA technology, miniaturization. You make phone calls to Los Angeles or to Taiwan or to France. It all goes to satellites, all using technology that NASA has developed. And if you go on to the next slide.
Yeah, well, we put your PR up there.
Yeah.
If you want to hear more stories like this, spaceagechronicle.com is where Bob has posted his fabulous stories up there, many that we're retelling here on Stay Curious. So check that out. I'll show this to you at the end of the program.
Well, yeah, when you get to the Gemini and Apollo era in the mid and late 60s, oh, there you are, a glass of Tang.
Yes,
yes. The breakfast of astronauts. Well, if you ask people, well, what are some spin-offs from the American space program? The three things people mentioned the most was Teflon, Tang, and Velcro, all of which was used extensively in the space program. Teflon is electronic insulation, a breakfast drink beverage for astronauts. Velcro is important because you pull out a pen and you write something and you let go, it's going to float around. So you put Velcro on the pen and you stick it to some Velcro on the wall so it doesn't float around. Used extensively, but not a one is actually a spinoff of the American space program.
And well, so who developed them? I mean, just briefly, there's some other company developed them.
Well, I can't remember who developed any one of them, but it's just products that were used extensively in the space program. It wasn't necessarily something developed for or by the space program. Now, if you get on to the next slide, what you see is something that did uh, be used in the space program. The first image there on the left is a test of spacecraft heat shield material. And one of the things that went into the ablative material on the bottom of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo spacecraft was this substance that was used in Corningware. And you can see a picture there of Corningware, half of it frozen in a block of ice, and somebody putting a blowtorch to the upper half of it, and it doesn't crack. You know, one of the things that any cook will know, if you have a Pyrex glass dish and you fix a casserole in that and you serve it all up and it's all gone, if that dish is still hot, you put it away and wait for it to cool down to room temperature before you add water. Otherwise, going from that heat to sudden cold will cause it to crack. And so the material that polystyrene that goes into Corningware, something that's used in kitchens across America, all that a direct derivative from the American space program in the early days back in Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo. And if you skip on to the next one.
Just before I do, Cliff Watson's joined us down in Pomona, Australia. We had some Aussies in here today, one from Queensland. It'll probably get a hold of you. A guy named Kurt. And Cliff down under says DuPont did the Velcro.
Okay.
So thank you for keeping us staying curious about that. So we're enjoying a talk here with Robert Granath of things that you might not have known about the space age.
One of the most important technologies to come out of early NASA work was the development of the heart pacemaker. A number of people, as they get older, their heart gets to a point where it doesn't quite beat at the rate that it should. And a lot of people, that's led to their early death. But when the pacemaker was made in this box that you see against the red background, that's what one of the first pacemakers looked like. Had dials on it, was fairly large, had wires that would come from the heart through the body to a box that would stick in your shirt pocket. And so it was cumbersome, but it would keep a lot of people alive. Now, today, a pacemaker looks more like the device that you see in that blue surgical glove, and something that can be completely under your skin and completely invisible, but it's something that will keep your heart beating at the appropriate rate. I had a good friend who had a heart pacemaker. One of the problems with him is every now and then he'd have an unusual heartbeat. And he said one night he was sitting up in bed and all of a sudden he felt like he couldn't breathe quite right. He had sort of shortness of breath. And then that device fired and pow, he said he felt like somebody punched him in the chest. Well, what happened is the defibrillator built into that restarted his heart going back to a normal beat. And he said as soon as that went off and he got off feeling like he'd been punched in the chest, he could breathe normally again. And so that device, based on NASA technology, was able to keep him alive for many more years. And it's just one of the important technological developments that very early came from the American space program.
Neil Armstrong, of course, first man on the moon, died during a botched pacemaker surgery.
Yeah.
It was after surgery on there. He had a pacemaker for many years, and it was not a good situation there when he passed away about 12 years ago at age, I think he was 82. Yeah, what a great invention, of course, there. So how did America's space program begin, Bob?
Well, this is something that I use when I speak to student groups, especially older elementary school, middle school, and high school students. And I'll ask them, what was the event that marked the start of the American space program? And they'll guess maybe the first moon landing, maybe the first launch of a satellite. One of the things that comes up most frequently, you'll see on the next slide, is they'll guess the first launch from Cape Canaveral, something we talked about here just a few weeks ago.
Did a great program on that, 75th anniversary.
Yep, bumper 8, the first launch from Cape Canaveral. Well, what I like to tell the young people is the idea of spaceflight begins with an idea. Somebody sort of plants a seed. And so if you go on to the next one, I tell them the American space program began October 19th, 1899. And they say, whoa, 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 whoa.
1899.
Wait, what are you talking about? You see the young man there in that picture in the lower left?
Yep.
That's 17-year-old Robert Goddard.
I thought it was Chris Calley
Yeah.
who's watching today.
Yeah.
Hi, buddy.
All right. Well, what happened is he was a big fan of science fiction books. Jules Verne's From the Earth to the Moon, H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds.
Oh, yes. Classics.
Aliens from Mars invading Earth. Well, he climbed up in a tree on his grandfather's farm when he was 17 years old, and Robert Goddard actually wrote down the date, October 19, 1899. Climbed up this tree, looked out into the sunset sky, and he picked out Mars. And he said, wouldn't it be cool if we had a way to get there? He spent the rest of his life developing the technology that's used in every rocket NASA's ever launched. And what you'll see in the next slide is that you see there on the left, the world's first liquid propellant rocket. So why is that crucial? Rockets up to this point use solid fuel, mostly gunpowder. It was invented by the Chinese. And it had been used in warfare, but a rocket like that has a gunpowder-like fuel. You can light a fuse, there's the spark, but it has to have the oxygen in the air around it before you have the three elements required for fire: fuel, oxygen, and a spark. But you don't have the oxygen in space, so you have to take the oxygen with you. So what he had was a rocket that was fueled by gasoline and liquid oxygen. And that became crucial for actually building rockets that are going to actually work into outer space. Now, in the next slide,
I just wanted to just mention that our docent, Eric Baker, loves talking about October 19th in Goddard because it's also his personal birthday.
Oh, okay.
Eric was a test project engineer and has been on the last few Fridays with us. But Goddard remembered this date all his life. And
Right.
celebrated it as his anniversary day, right?
Yeah, that was the day the spark occurred where he sort of planted the seed and he started doing research in rockets.
Makes me want to watch the 1853 movie version of with Gene Barry of War of the Worlds. I may do that this
All right.
Halloween.
Well, in this slide, there's a quote from the New York Times where they're saying space travel is impossible. He doesn't understand the physics that's taught in high schools. Now, we're not going to talk about that. It's a little more in a few minutes. Well, there
Professor Goddard, it is clear, lacks the knowledge ladled out daily in high schools. I mean, what a kick to the curb. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez.
Well, the rocket that he had in that particular slide is one that he launched near his home in Worcester, Massachusetts. And it went up and it came down in the field, had a lot of dry straw and it set afire. Well, a woman nearby heard a crash, thought it was an airplane, called the fire department. They showed up, found Goddard and his colleagues using their jackets to slap out the fire that was burning in the field. And the city council said, no more rocket tests here. So that's when he moved out to the New Mexico desert. But he was also, at about that time, writing his book, A Method of Reaching Extreme Altitudes. If you clip on to the next one, well, that book and The Rocket into Planetary Space, written by Hermann Oberth, inspired a young man named Werner von Braun, who lived in Germany, and he was developing an interest in space flight. And the gentleman there standing next to a rocket that's about 6 feet tall, and the one next to it, just to the right, is Hermann Oberth, who wrote the rocket into planetary space. He was writing about space flight. Goddard was writing about space flight. And that framed picture you see is a picture that hung in Werner von Braun's bedroom because Goddard was his hero.
Is that right? He had that picture on the,
And well, early on, he started thinking about wanting to send people into space. And the next slide will show this is a sketch that is on display at the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama. It's the visitor center for the Marshall Space Flight Center and Redstone Arsenal. Von Braun did this sketch when he was 13 years old of what could be a one-man spacecraft. Of course, it's sketched in pencil and the labels are written in ink. It's in cursive and in German, but for example, right forward is a window and it's labeled Fenster, which is the German word for window. And above the astronaut's head is what looks like a little light bulb and it's labeled Licht, which is German for light. He has a gyroscope in it. He has room for propellant. And he's thinking even at age 13.
There's the light bulb right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's about it. That early about the idea of sending people into space. And of course, he eventually began working for the German army, led the team that developed the V2, and after the war came to the United States. And in the next slide, you see.
He's created the service command module.
Yeah.
On the back end of it there. That's interesting, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah.
I've never seen that, Bob.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And that sketch is on display at the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville. But he led the team to develop the Redstone rocket and its derivative, the Jupiter C rocket, which launched our first satellite in January of 1958. And of course, he went on after he moved from the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, went to work for NASA, and led the team that built our Saturn V, which you'll see in the next slide. That's von Braun when he was the director of the Marshall Space Flight Center, and the picture is the first Saturn V launch in November of 1967. And all of that led eventually to putting the first astronauts on the surface of the moon a couple of years later, which shows up in the next slide.
Is that the all-up Saturn VI? The sixth launch, I think, there?
It's the Apollo 4 launch.
I mean, yeah, okay, okay.
It's, 1967.
That led to this.
And led to putting the astronauts on the moon. Of course, this is a picture of Buzz Aldrin near the seismic experiment with the lunar module Eagle in the background, the picture taken by Neil Armstrong. In the background, you can see the flag, and just off to the left is the TV camera that sent back the black and white live images that we saw of that first spacewalk.
Right above Bob's head is the laser prism that they could hit. A laser is the prism mirror that they
exactly
could hit from Earth to the moon with that.
And they were able to use that to pinpoint the distance from the Earth to the moon down to within a couple of inches.
Yeah.
So it was an amazing device and just an early experiment set up in the Apollo program. Now, I like to talk about Neil Armstrong when I talk to young people. Of course, he was an Eagle Scout growing up in Wapakoneta, Ohio. Well, when you talk about teenagers, I remember when I was in high school, as my colleagues reached their 16th birthday, a lot of them just regularly hit age 16. They'd skip school that day, go off and get their driver's license. Neil Armstrong wasn't interested in getting his driver's license right away. He wanted to get his pilot's license. When he was 16, he learned how to fly, got his pilot's license before he had a driver's license. So he could legally fly an airplane before he could drive a car. Wow. He was that interested in aviation and flying. And you go on to the next one, you see that he was quite successful. The picture in the upper right is when he was a naval aviator flying for the Navy during the Korean War. Came back, became a test pilot, flew the X-15 rocket plane, commanded the Gemini 8 mission, and flew the Gemini spacecraft, and of course went from that on to piloting the lunar module that put he and Buzz Aldrin on the surface of the moon in July of 1969. Now, the thing to keep in mind is each generation inspires the next generation. Goddard, as an adult scientist, was inspiring a 13-year-old kid named von Braun, who built the Saturn V that put Neil Armstrong, who became interested in flying when he was a kid. And then while Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were walking on the moon, if you go on to the next slide, there was a young lady who was 9 years old, growing up on a farm in Iowa, named Peggy Whitson. She was watching that moonwalk and said, you know, I'd like to become an astronaut. And of course she did. And if you go on to the next slide, you see her at work aboard the International Space Station. I mentioned that she grew up on a farm. She grew soybeans on board the International Space Station to see, can we grow products in space, something that may be important if you're going to spend a 2 or 3 or 4 year mission going out to the planet Mars. And while she was on board the International Space Station, you go to the next one, she had a chance to talk to some students at a small town of Urbandale, Iowa. While she was in space, she talked to a young man named Jeff Halton, who was 10 years old, and he's watching a monitor, seeing her aboard the space station in space and thinking about, tell me what it takes to become an astronaut. And so she explained in this broadcast, these are the things you need to do if you're interested in becoming an astronaut. You know, find a subject that you're really passionate about and you believe in. Go study that. Get a college degree. Get advanced degrees. Work hard. Apply, and you may become like Peggy Whitson, becoming an astronaut. Now, let's talk about Peggy's success. As you see here, she has flown into space once on the space shuttle, twice aboard a Soyuz, and twice aboard a Crew Dragon spacecraft on the Axiom 2 and Axiom 4 missions that were commercial flights of astronauts to the International Space Station. As a result, she has spent 695 days in space, and that is the most of any American and most of any woman. There's a couple of Russian astronaut or cosmonauts that have flown longer than that. There's a Russian cosmonaut named Oleg Kononenko, who spent 1,111 days in space on several missions. And then the single longest space station by any individual was Valery Polyakov, who spent 437 days in space during 1994 and 1997.
Over a year
and
3 months.
94 and 95 rather. But she was a little girl watching television, watching an astronaut, and said, I want to do that, and worked hard and successfully made it as an astronaut, and now as a commercial astronaut working with SpaceX. And she spent almost 700 days in space.
Chief of the astronaut office also for many years there, around the 2009 to 2011 area there. And by all accounts, with Axiom, she may go to space again.
Yeah, it's very possible because she is a commercial astronaut with that company, and so
just got inducted into the Hall of Fame at Kennedy Space Center.
Most deservedly
too.
All right, the next one I wanted to talk about Sir Isaac Newton,
and a little rock and roll too.
Oh yeah, now that to come. Well, talked about in the New York Times are saying you can't fly a rocket in space. There's no air against which for the exhaust to push against. It's not the exhaust pushing against the air. It's the exhaust expelling from the rocket, or in this case, a demonstration with a balloon. I often do this when I speak to school groups. I get them all to blow up a balloon, let it go, and I say, all right, now why does it just go all over the place? No guidance system. The rocket has a guidance system. But Newton had 3 laws of gravity. The first one being an object at rest tends to stay at rest. This microphone sits here, it's going to stay there until there's an action put on it. Now, when I was a child sitting in the front seat of my dad's car and he's driving along, I was often introduced to Newton's second law of gravity. An object in motion tends to stay at motion. And so he's driving along at 30 miles an hour, and a car pulls out in front of Dad. He slams on the brake. I continue traveling at 30 miles an hour, and I'm introduced to the dashboard of the car. And so that's an example of Newton's second law. But for rocket flight, Newton's third law, for every action force, there is always an equal and opposite reaction force. And so that's when you blow up a balloon and you let it go, The air escaping from the balloon pushes the balloon. The exhaust coming out of the rocket pushes the rocket up. And the fact that it takes its oxygen with you in the form of liquid oxygen or some other oxidizer allows the rocket to work in outer space. Now, as I've looked at pictures of Sir Isaac Newton over the years, I thought, you know, he looks a lot like another PhD with a degree in physics. So if you go on to the
Who
next
might
one,
that be?
yeah, you wouldn't really think of a rocker, Brian May, the legendary lead guitarist of the rock group Queen, but you see there's a little bit of
Yes.
a resemblance there. Sir Isaac Newton, they're both knighted. Sir Brian May, they
Yeah.
both have PhDs. They're both physicists. Now, Newton was also an astronomer. Brian May is a rock star. Now, a lot of times when you talk about somebody being a rock star, you say, oh man, he's really good at that. He's a rock star. Well, the members of the rock group Queen were rock stars. But you don't really think of a rock star being a scientist. Well, as you saw in that last slide, as you know, Freddie Mercury died in November of 1991. After that, the members of the band sort of went their separate ways for a while. John Deacon, the bass player that you see off on the right, he went back to school, got a master's degree in mathematics. Brian May went back to school and got a doctorate in astrophysics. Now, this is what kind of blows my mind. Brian May's doctoral thesis was a survey of radial velocities in the zodiacal dust cloud. Okay. Well, right after he got his degree, he came to the United States and then started working with NASA scientists and developing instrumentation for the New Horizon probe that was launched to the planet Pluto in 2006. And it took over 9 years for New Horizons to reach Pluto. And when it arrived and the data started coming in, Brian May was there with all the scientists interpreting the data and looking at the pictures and doing studies. What Brian developed, and if you go on to the next slide, you see
There's the crew. There's Brian up there in the upper left-hand corner. Didn't know Pluto was going to look like. It ended up being a pretty good artist impression there.
yeah. So he developed a device where you can take some of the imagery and put it together where you can look at through the device that he's using in his hand and you see a stereophonic image. It takes this flat two-dimensional image you get in the pictures and it makes into something where you get a lot better and clearer image of exactly what the terrain looked like. All this coming from an instrument developed by a rock star. And so, yep, when somebody is really good at something, you say, oh, he's a rock star. Well,
Yeah.
Brian May is a rock star. And somebody's really, really smart, so, oh, he's a rocket scientist. Well, he really is a rocket scientist. You don't think of many people being both,
Both.
but he was.
That is Pluto, by the way, the
Right.
cantaloupe surface. These are photos taken at 30,000 miles an hour whizzing by Pluto.
Right.
One shot to look at it and so forth. And Dr. May has also used this stereoscopic technique on other features too,
Right.
like the
And that's what comes up
on
next.
other planets and,
Oh, yeah.
and moons.
Well, in the next slide, well, see what happened is after he was doing all this work, he and Roger Taylor, the drummer, started looking to see if somebody could pick up and be their new lead singer. And when they found Adam Lampert and added him to reinvent Queen, they invited John Deacon to come back. Well, with his master's degree in mathematics, he became a high school math teacher. And he said, you know what? I'm not really interested in going on the road and being a rock star again. I'm going to stay teaching
Is
mathematics
that right?
to a high school there in England. So he goes back to performing with Queen. And you go on to the next slide. And in 2016, the United States launched a spacecraft called OSIRIS-REx, which was an instrument that was sent out to an asteroid called Brunel, and they were going to orbit this thing. I think it was launched in 2016, it arrived in 2018, and spent 2 or 3 years orbiting this asteroid. And the plan is to pick out a spot to grasp some regolith and bring it back to Earth for study. And it did, in fact, come back, as you see, it was commemorated in this postage stamp. But they couldn't quite decide where to reach down and scoop up some of that regolith. So they're saying, how do we decide? They called in Brian May.
Really?
So we go to the next one. And so he came back with his instruments, took some of the photographs they had been reviewing of the possible sites to scoop up some of the dirt and soil and rock that was there. And he, using his instruments, helped them pick the exact spot where they wanted to actually scoop up some soil and bring back to Earth. So it's amazing when you think you have to call in a guy from a rock group to use some instruments to help NASA scientists decide where to pick up samples from an interplanetary asteroid.
Very interesting. And Brian May's doctorate degree about zodiacal light is particles that are like dust motes. They wonder how big they are. It's like sand size that are just around the solar system, and with gravity lining them up with the ecliptic or where the planets go, it lines up about this time of year in February where you see a cone of light above the horizon after sunset. And that's zodiacal light, if you've seen it, and that's what he investigated there. So very cool, way cool. Didn't know you knew so much about the group Queen. That's interesting. Adam Lambert, who become a Queen singer, won I think he was runner up in one of those
America's Got Talent. What happened on that?
I think it was The Voice. I think it was. Maybe, or was it, no, it wasn't The Voice. It was one of the first ones. There.
Yeah, but what happened is Brian May just happened to be watching it, and here this guy comes on. And he sings part of the Queen hit, "A Bohemian Rhapsody," and he said he does a good job of that. So he called up Roger Taylor, the drummer, and said, "Hey, let's watch this guy for a while." So he keeps progressing, and he makes it to the final. Lampert and one other guy who I don't remember.
Yeah.
And so when they reached that, they called the producers of the show and said, "How would you like to have Queen perform as backup for your singers in this final?" And so it was, hey, that's great. What they were actually doing is Brian and Roger were auditioning at Aunt Lambert without him even knowing about it. And so he did so well that they asked him, "How would you like to be our lead singer?" And indeed, they now perform with him and become quite popular. I was always wondered, how does Buckingham Palace feel about a rock group calling themselves Queen? Well, during one of the celebrations of an anniversary for Queen Elizabeth, they had Brian May stand on the roof of Buckingham Palace and use his guitar and play "God Save the Queen" in the style of Jimi Hendrix performing the Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock. And it was very well received. And so when the Queen had her 75th Jubilee, not that long before she passed away, they were the first group to play with several rock groups in a celebration of the Jubilee. And so they not only had Queen performing, they had the Royal Drum Corps playing right along with it. And so obviously Buckingham Palace likes the group just fine.
Show you some more Queen there with Adam Lambert and of course the late Freddie Mercury. And you can't hardly go a week if you listen to pop rock radio without hearing a Queen song for sure on there. And very, very awesome. I actually saw I've been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland several times, and they had a display of the clothing that people wore on stage. And I knowing Brian May was an astronomer, I just kept looking at this tunic that he had on there.
Oh, yeah.
And the group The Clash,
Yeah.
punk rock band that was really good, The Clash. They came out in like torn shirts and jackets
Yeah.
and had duct tape on them and stuff like that. That was a costume.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
walk around town like that. That was
Right.
because it kind of was like they were in an exhibit there and said the costume worn on stage by, you know, uh, the Clash. So
Um,
we digress with some rock and roll history here on Stay Curious, as you never know what we're going to talk about, particularly when we have a guest and me together here. So
well, it
hope you've
shows
all
how the
enjoyed
space
this for
program
sure.
expands into
Yeah.
all areas of human life now.
Hope Dean Babcock's enjoyed this. Steve Jokums, RG Jubilee. Thank you, Rosalie, for all your comments. Tom Usiak. We saw pictures of his STS-95 launch and the cameras here in our museum. Freeway of the Other has been joining us. Tom Celentano wearing his Friendship 7 badge of John Glenn. Mostly Park. Glad that you're here today and parked with us here for about an hour. Mitch Rothman is Man Space. Gary Gerald. Thank you, Gary, for watching. Jacqueline Murakami, but that is really Chris Callie under alias. Hey, buddy. Doug Forrest, Cliff Watson down under. Doug Forrest is in Los Angeles. Did you watch any of the World Series?
Oh, I've watched it. Stayed up late.
I made the 13 innings, 1 o'clock the other night.
Yeah.
18 inning
Well,
game. Wow.
I think it was about the 13th inning where I gave it up, but I set the DVR so I could watch it the next day.
Yeah. DVR with Toronto's up. No, they're tied 2 games apiece.
That's
Yeah,
right.
2 games apiece. So they'll definitely have to go back to Toronto. And Fred Kiner's watching today. Fred, thank you for your comments and watching today. He said that he should have gone to the Queen Lambert concert. Darn it! So, thank you all for watching today. We're gonna have who are we gonna have on tomorrow? We're gonna have the National Space Society is going to be here. His name's escaping me at the moment. Should have wrote it down there. Senior moment there. All right.
Is it Bert?
Bert Dicht. Bert Dicht.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Bert. Had lunch with Bert the other day out there at Kennedy Space Center. Bert Dicht will be here. He goes all over the country doing things for the National Space Society. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. Great looking back with you at the STS-95 mission there with the UCX walkout.
Oh, yeah.
The launch there, and this shot here taken with a camera that we have on loan from the UCX. And John Glenn passed away at age 95 about 8 years ago, 6,
Yeah.
7, 8 years ago on there. So if you want to hear some more stories from Bob, or not here, but read your spaceagechronicle.com. How many stories you have on there, Bob?
I've lost count of how many I've posted.
Okay.
I posted
So more
a
than
couple
his
recently.
hands and toes can count all together there.
Yeah.
So great. You're
right.
such a great guest, and
All right.
you're becoming such a
Well,
good
we
friend.
enjoy it.
We do enjoy it. We have a lot of fun talking
Yeah.
before and after the show, and I hope that you all can come in and enjoy that one time. But Bob will get you something going here for November. Okay, that was a
Okay.
great Rocktober report from him, particularly with Queen and Dr. Brian May being so influential. Brian May's also behind the Asteroid Day.
Yes.
He created Asteroid Day
Yeah.
June 30th to recognize not if, but when something big is going to hit the Earth. Doesn't have to be that big. 10 miles across would hit the Earth anywhere, would create chaos for probably a good
Yeah.
decade around here. So anyway, we are a planet. We're all Earthlings, and the only border that should matter is that thin blue line that keeps us all alive, the atmosphere. So says our friend and supporter Nicole Stott. What a great
Yeah.
astronaut. So,
Oh, yeah.
Bob, again, thank you very much. Come see us. Come see Nicole's sleeping bag that we have in our women's gallery, okay? And then come see me to shake your hand. Mark Marquette will be here to bridge the space between us. Thank you so much.
Great show.
Right.